Heroscape is a game that Hasbro started producing in 2004, which stopped in 2010, but is continuing again in 2024 when Renegade Game Studios picks up the title and starts to release new content, starting with the Age of Annihilation content that was teased by Avalon Hill in 2022 for a failed HasLab campaign. But Heroscape is a 3D, customizable tabletop miniatures game. In it, you can take terrain, stack it, and attach it any way that you can with the hexes. It creates elevation, creates different terrain options, and creates a whole bunch of ways to play. So you can just snap them together, then you build an army, grab some dice, grab a friend or two or more, and have a small battle, a huge battle, weeks-long siege, etc. The game is up to you how you want to play it. Now, I know that I have previously made a Learn the Basic Game Rules for Heroscape using a Rise of the Valkyrie Master Set, so I'm not going to go over the basic rules again for this next series of videos. I also know I have a Learn the Master Rules set for Heroscape, which I'm going to go over again in Swarm of the Marro, because I'm going to treat every video as if it is the first one that someone is watching to learn the rules. So I may repeat stuff and there may not be new information, but I took relevant things like swamp water and put those in another terrain teaching video. So we're going to use Montegua Ledge Battlefield today to show you some rules and maybe just a few other pieces of terrain to show you things like overhangs and such. But let's learn the game Heroscape. This is the Master Rule set, so this will be a little more complicated than just moving and rolling dice. When it comes to Heroscape, in my personal opinion, there are three main pillars that are the theme of Heroscape. Those are historical, fantasy, and sci-fi. These three pillars were the main themes that composed the units, squads, heroes, and armies of Heroscape for the quote-unquote battle of all time. In the story, Valkyrie generals summon units from across space and time to battle over the magical well springs which grant them magical powers. So the battle in Valhalla is composed of pretty much anything you can imagine. Then, the three pillars may also mix and match. Fantasy units may get sci-fi weapons, sci-fi units may have fantasy weapons, or historical units may get sci-fi, fantasy, etc. All of them just intermingle, but these three main ideas are what founded the original idea of Heroscape. So step one for Heroscape is get ready to play. Set up your battlefield. To do this, choose a battlefield and master game scenario from the Battlefields and Game Scenarios sections of your rulebooks, and after you've played several games, you may want to create your own battlefields and game scenarios, or you can ignore the scenarios altogether and just build, learn the rules, and play. In team setting and play, if you're playing a team game, teammates should sit next to each other on one side of the table facing their opponents. Teammates play the game separately, but they can discuss strategy, offer suggestions, and so on. Victory conditions for teams vary in the game scenario, but in most games they work together toward a common goal. And just a quick look at how that works in the scenario rulebooks for these games. They come in the expansion packs, the master sets, and they used to be online on Heroscape.com, which is now a defunct website. But you would get your battlefield key, it would tell you the glyphs, which we will explain in a little while, and then you would just start building according to each level of the board. And as I stated earlier, we're using Montegua Ledge, and then it has basic game rules, has master game rules, which in the Swarm of the Marro Master Box was a campaign master game that you could play. Then it has up here the red, green, blue, etc., which would be starting zones. It tells you where characters begin, victory conditions, and other things. There is playing with multiple master sets and or expansion sets, which we will explain after the rules of the game. So, we'll start with About Army cards. This is the basic side of an army card. But in this game, you'll be using the master game side of the army card. As in the basic game, each army card features either a hero or a squad with move, range, attack, and defense. Those numbers all matter for the amount of hexes they can go, see, and the amount of dice they roll, etc. But you'll notice that the Master Game side of each card has much more information about the figures. As you play, you'll become more familiar with how all of this information figures into the gameplay. Let's go over the anatomy of an army card right now. Alright, let's break down an army card. In this example here, first we'll start on the left-hand side of the card, which is the stats about the figure or figures on the card. The top one is the species of the figure or figures on the army card. That is their biological classification. Below that, we have whether the army card is a hero or squad, and whether they are unique, uncommon, or common. So starting with explaining uniques, unique army cards. When selecting to put in your army, you cannot select more than 2 of the same unique army card. Jumping over real quick to right here, which is an uncommon army card. Each army may have any number of an uncommon army card with the same name. If your army has 2 or more of the same uncommon army card, you must keep those figures separate. That is, keep track of which figure belongs to which card. For example, if you're going to be using 2 Greater Ice Elementals, you must clearly mark each Greater Ice Elemental figure and matching Greater Ice Elemental army card so you can tell which Greater Ice Elemental is being activated by which order markers and which wound markers belong to which Greater Ice Elemental. Uncommon figures are considered to be unique figures in every other way, except for the fact that you can have multiples of the same army card. Alright, now we're going to jump over real quick before we continue on the anatomy of the army card to common figures. Common army cards. The rule for this is your army can include 2 or more of the same common army card. If so, follow these special rules. You don't need to keep these figures separate. That is, keep track of which figures belong to which card. For example, if you're using 2 cards worth of Marden Nagrubs, then each order marker placed on either army card activates any 3 of them. When you place an order marker on a common army card that you have multiples of, it will activate any amount of the miniatures on the army card. So it doesn't matter which molds you use. If you have, say, 15 Nagrubs on the field, and you activate one of these cards, it will activate any 3 of the 15 on the field. And the second special rule for common army cards is, when a figure on your common army card is destroyed, you may place it on any matching army card if you do not have any of these figures destroyed. If a common army card already has a destroyed figure on it, you must fill up that card first before placing a destroyed figure on the empty card. So we'll say Sonlund has killed this Nagrub, and we have a few cards over here, and another one gets killed later on for some reason. But you can't start a fresh army card. You have to finish off by getting at least 3 destroyed Nagrubs on this card before you would move to your next army card. Alright, now moving on to the next part is their class. This is the type that the figure is. For instance, Shiori is a ninja. Then below that we have their personality, which is their dominant characteristic, which would be tricky in this case. And then finally, below that, we have the size and height of the figure. This is the size of the hero or squad and the number of levels high they are in the game. Moving from that side of the card to the other side of the card, we have this area here. This green dot denotes their target point. This is where the line of sight is drawn from when determining whether or not this figure can see other figures. The red area is the hit zone that shows what part of the figure can be attacked when checking line of sight. Gray denotes areas that your enemy may not target when they are targeting this figure for an attack. And now moving down to this list here. Starting at the top, we have life. This is the number of wounds it takes to destroy the figure. Those are wound markers. Then, below that, we have the move, the maximum number of spaces this figure or figures may move. The range, the number of spaces away that this figure or figures can attack. The attack, the number of dice you roll for a normal attack. And then defense, the number of dice you roll for defend. And then down below that, you have points, which are used in drafting or scoring for certain scenarios and games. Now, to the left of all the stats down here, we have the special power or powers of the characters. Most figures have special powers that allow them to quote-unquote break the rules when moving, attacking, and defending. So, Shiori has these 3 here. This is gathering and placing your army. Number 2 of getting ready to play Heroscape. For the Master Game scenarios, you can use a pre-made army that may be listed in the scenario, or a preset army, or you can draft an army. These are the three ways of gathering an army. As you gather your army, make sure that the total point value does not exceed the one listed on your chosen game scenario or the point limit agreed by the players beforehand. It can be lower, but not higher. Players don't need to have the same number of army cards. For example, you may have 3 army cards while your opponent may have 4 or 5 army cards. Army card colors. So, let's go over these real quick. The primary colors of Heroscape are denoted by the army cards. We have Jandar, who's represented by blue, Ular, who is represented by green, Einar, who is represented by purple, Aquila, who is represented by yellow, Valkrill, who is represented by brown, Vidar, who is represented by gray, and then Utgar, who's represented by red. Now, you could say this is a burnt orange, you could say it's rust, you could say this is silver, etc., but basically it's blue, green, purple, yellow, brown, gray, red. And then, when the game gets relaunched in 2024 from Renegade Game Studios, the bone white, which is going to represent Revna, who was originally orange, and then we have like a lighter lime green, which is Volarak, and then we have announced Thorman as a general that's coming, and we do not know which color that will be at this time, or if Thorman is even still coming, because Renegade has only confirmed the Age of Annihilation content that was revealed in the failed HasLab is coming, but we'll see as more information comes out. So, when building your army card, the loyalties of good and evil warriors may become neutral or even shift to the other side. Therefore, your army can include mixed colors. You do not have to just strictly play good versus evil or Utgar versus Jandar. You can mix and match and use whatever units you like. Using a pre-made army. In this instance, we'll say that Derek has brought along an army that he knows exactly who it is that he wanted based on the game scenario, the point values, their favorite figures, or other figures. If you've already chosen or brought along your army, place your cards in front of you. Then, players will roll a 20-sided die to see who places their army on the battlefield first. Re-roll ties. The highest roller will place his entire army first. Placement then passes to the left. You must place your entire army in the same starting zone. You cannot place any figures in an enemy-occupied starting zone unless stated otherwise or agreed upon by the players beforehand. Teammates will start in the same starting zone. If there are more army figures than spaces in the starting zone, you can't use the extra figures. Using a preset army. Some scenarios have the armies chosen for you. As in the basic game, you choose the preset army you want to control. After choosing your army, place your army cards in front of you, then place your figures on the battlefield, which in this case it would show you the exact placement of the figures when you start. Drafting an army. Drafting is a fair and fun way for players to choose their army cards for a well-balanced game. When you select an army card, take the figure or figures shown on that card and place them in a starting zone immediately before the next player selects an army card. You must place your entire army in the same starting zone. You cannot place any figures in an enemy-occupied starting zone unless stated otherwise in the game scenario or in the case of some custom games agreed upon by the players beforehand. Teammates will start in the same starting zone. If there are more army figures than spaces in the starting zone, you can't use the extra figures. In this example, we'll say Derek and Corwin are sitting down for a 2-player Heroscape game. So first, both players roll a 20-sided die, re-rolling any ties. The higher roller would draft first by choosing one single army card. In this case, we'll say Shiori was chosen. Her figure is taken and placed in the starting zone. And then we move to step 2, which would be the other player chooses 2 army cards. So we'll say in this example, Sonlin and Amarda Nagrubs are chosen, and they are deposited in player 2's starting zone. Then, step 3 would be each player in turn chooses 1 army card until both armies have been completely chosen and placed. But what to do with multiple players? So we'll say Derek and Corwin agreed to play Heroscape, but their friend Kyle also wanted to join. So for 3 or more player games, we'll say that Nathan also joined, so now we're up to 4. You would do this by starting with all players rolling a 20-sided die, re-rolling any ties. The highest roller would draft first by choosing a single army card. The player to the left would then choose an army card, and so on. The last player would choose 2 army cards. Drafting goes back around the table, it reverses direction. The last player, the player who drafted first, would then choose 2 army cards. The draft reverses direction again. If at any time a player cannot pick another army card because choosing it would exceed the total army point limit, that player must pass. If you pass, you've completed your army for the draft. Then continue going back and forth around the table with the last player in each direction choosing 2 army cards and reversing the draft direction until all players have completed their armies. And here's just a visual example of what a deployed army would look like. You chose this army for a 500 point total and placed them where shown. Then your opponent chose this army for a 500 point total and placed them where shown. These are order markers. Each player takes 4 order markers, 1, 2, 3, and X. On each round, you'll place these on your army cards to mark the order in which your figure or figures will move and attack. These are wound markers and combat dice. Place all of the wound markers and the combat dice near the battlefield. The combat dice are used for attack dice, rolling for attacks, and defense dice, rolling for defense. This is a glyph. These quote-unquote magical enchantments are placed on certain spaces in several of the game scenarios, or according to the map creator or agreed upon by the players beforehand. Most of them grant special powers when a figure lands on them. Going into a little more detail about glyphs, depending on the scenario, glyphs are placed on the top of the battlefield spaces either power side up, such as this one, or symbol side up, such as those two. Glyphs are stationary unless otherwise stated in a scenario. When one of your figures moves onto a glyph that is symbol side up, stop there and turn the glyph power side up. The powers on that glyph would take effect immediately. When one of your figures lands on a power side up glyph, it must stop. Note, a double space figure must stop when its leading side moves onto it. The power of each glyph may be temporary, while others grant longer lasting ones. For each glyph your figure finds, follow the rules of that glyph, which are explained in the rulebooks that came with the glyphs, or on army cards in the case of glyphs that came in expansions. So, we'll go over the 2 types of glyphs that are available right now, which are permanent. The power of each permanent glyph is in effect for as long as your figure is standing on it. Then there are temporary glyphs. The power of each temporary glyph takes effect only once. When one of your figures moves onto any of these types of glyphs, follow its rules, then remove it from the game. Using these examples that I have set up here, this is a permanent style glyph. That would be, just in this case, the glyph of Thorian, which means all of your opponent's figures must be adjacent to your figures to attack your figures with a normal attack. And then we'll say, in the case of temporary glyphs, right here, the glyph of Nilrend, which is negation. When one of your figures stops here, you may choose any opponent's unique figure, roll a 20-sided die. If you roll a 1 to 4, nothing happens. If you roll a 5 to 20, place the gold negation marker on a chosen figure's army card. All of that figure's special powers are negated for the rest of the game. Which, since it mentioned negation markers, I'll just show you there are other examples in addition to wound markers of little tokens that can represent things in the game. Alright, now that everything is set up, you're ready for the battle begins, the next phase. The game is played in several rounds. A round consists of 3 turns for each player, denoted by their order markers. So we'll go over this, starting with a round of play. The round marker track first. The round marker track in the Battlefields and Game Scenarios section is available for all the scenarios available in the rulebooks. However, you can just have anything to mark a certain set of rounds when playing custom games. Each game scenario where the numbers are in a line, that will be where players keep track of the rounds they've played. Before starting the first round, place the black round order marker on the number 1. At the end of each round, move the round marker ahead to the next number. While playing Heroscape, each round will consist of the same 4 steps. The first one will be players placing their order markers on their army cards. Then, each player takes a 20-sided die and rolls for initiative. Then, players will take their turns one at a time until each player has taken 3 turns, denoted by these order markers being 1 through 3 and X. Then, 4, you'll move the round marker to the next round number, which, if it was at 1, like it was properly supposed to be, we'd be on round 2. Number 1, place your order markers. On a turn, you'll move and attack with the figure or figures on one army card. Decide now which army card you'll use on which turn. Then, place an order marker on those cards, 1 for the first turn, 2 for the second turn, and 3 for the third turn. You may place 2 or more order markers on the same army card if you want to use that card for 2 or even all 3 of your turns. Players place their order markers one at a time. Place your order markers with the numbers facing you so that your opponents can't see them. Teammates can look at each other's order markers. The X order marker is the extra order marker and is not used on any of your turns unless a special power says so. It is only a decoy to prevent your opponents from knowing which 3 order markers you intend to use and when. If your army includes 2 or more of the same common army card, you don't need to keep these figures separate. That is, keep track of which figures belong to which card. For example, if you're using 2 of the Marden Nagrub figures, each order marker placed on either army card, which in this case I have them both stacked up just to keep it simple, activates any 3 of the Nagrubs on the card. It doesn't have to be the same molds that are represented on the card, just any 3 of the Marden Nagrubs in this instance that is in your army. More competitive players can take turns placing all of their order markers. To do this, roll a 20-sided die. The higher roller places all of his order markers first. Then the player to the left places all of their order markers, and so on until all order markers have been placed. In this example here, you have your order markers placed. You decide to mobilize Sonlin first, your Marro Stingers second, and then a squad of your Nagrubs on the third turn. Then you place your X order marker on Torquil Na to fake out your opponent. And in this example here, you went big with going for Sonlin, which is all 3, and you still kept your X over here. So your opponent is probably going to be able to guess that it is more likely that you're going all in on Sonlin rather than throwing a random turn towards Torquil Na. However, you may decide to do just that. Rolling for initiative. At the beginning of a round, each player rolls the 20-sided die for initiative. The player with the highest roll will get to take each of their turns first. Play then passes to the left. If there's a tie for highest rolls, the tying players re-roll. For example, Derek, Corwin, and Kyle are playing. Derek rolls a 2, Kyle rolls a 15, and Corwin rolls a 17. For the first turn, using order marker number 1, Corwin will go first. Then, play will pass to the left until all 3 players have played their first order marker. Then, Corwin, because he won initiative, will take his second turn, using order marker number 2, before Derek and Kyle. When the round ends after each player has taken their 3 turns, the players will replace their order markers and roll for initiative on the next round after the round marker has been moved up on the round track. On your turn. Each round, each player will take 3 turns. Usually you'll do 3 actions on your turn in this order. Action number 1 would be reveal your order marker. Action number 2, move your figures on the army card, optional. And then 3, attack with figures on the army card, also optional. All of these actions are explained in detail. So number 1, action, reveal your order marker, which always must be done, is start your turn by revealing your order marker for that turn, then laying it on its number side up on the army card. Note that later in the game it is possible that the figures on that army card will have been destroyed early in the round. In such a case that would happen, you would lose the turn on that order marker. And this is part of action number 2, moving your figures on your army card, which is an optional action. Now you may move any or all figures on your chosen army card if you want to. Follow these rules when moving each figure. Check their move number. In this case, Shiori was our number 1, and she has a movement of 6. You can move the figure in any direction up to the number on its army card. For example, with a move number of 6, the figure can move 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 spaces. Uneven terrain and water may limit movement, as you'll soon see. In this example of basic movement, this is what's going to happen. Shiori has a move number of 6. You advance her the full 6 spaces towards the opposing figures. Note that Shiori may move through this Marro Drudge because it is a friendly figure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In the case of an order of movement when it comes to squads, squad figures move in any order, one at a time. And just to go over that last example again that we did with Shiori, passing and landing on other figures. You can move through a space with a friendly figure on it, one of you or your teammates, unless the figure is engaged. You can't move through a space with an opponent's figure on it or end your move on a space with any other figure. In this example, we're going to go over moving up. When you move to a higher level, count the side of each higher level as one space, as well as the space that you land on. In the following example, I'll show you how to do this. If your figure can't move enough spaces to reach the top of a ledge, it cannot move there. Note that glyphs and water tiles and swamp water tiles do not add height to any spaces on which they're placed. So in this example, moving up will take this stinger. You'll count the side of each level as you move this Marro stinger to the top of the first ledge. Note that the Marro stinger cannot move to the top of the ledge because it would take a move of 6, and its movement is only 5. So we would in this case go 1, 2, 3, 4, and have to stop there because this would be its 5th movement and you can't land on the side. And it would take 6 to get up there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Height limit. A figure cannot move a number up of levels equal to or higher than its height number. In this example, Shiori cannot move up to this space even though she has a movement of 6 because it would take 5 moves to reach the top and her height is only 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, her height is represented on her army card on the left-hand side of 4, so she could not legally make that move. Moving down. When you move to a lower level, you don't need to count the sides on the way down, but there may be a penalty for moving to a much lower level, which is called falling. In this example here, Shiori has to move down from this ledge. You don't need to count the sides for the levels. And with her movement of 6, she can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we're going to go over falling. When a figure moves down to a much lower level, it may get wounded. Falling rules do not apply if a figure falls onto a water space. A figure can fall onto a water space from any level. However, all falling rules apply if a figure falls onto a swamp water space. Falling does not stop a figure's movement, but it may wound or destroy it. A fall is defined as follows. If a figure's move is down onto a level that is equal to or higher than the figure's height, you must roll 1 combat die immediately. And again, going here is 1, 2, 3, 4, which is Shiori's height. So that is equal to her height. She would move down, and thus she would immediately make a combat roll of a single die to see if she is wounded, which she would receive a wound. There's no defense rolled against that. Now the wording for a major fall is a little different in this book than it was when I read it in Rise of the Valkyrie. Either that or I made a mistake in several videos. Either way, this is falling damage for a major fall. If the drop is 10 levels or more than the figure's height, you must roll 2 additional dice for a total of 3 dice when falling. I originally was saying that the roll of 10 or higher levels than the height of the figure would only be 2 combat dice. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, Shiori's height, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That would constitute a major fall if she was to move off of there, which would be 3 combat dice, which would be 3 wounds, which is enough to destroy her. So instead of making that strategic error and taking the risk for the damage, you would want to move off into the water, which negates fall damage. And now an example of an extreme fall. If the move is 20 levels or more than the figure's height, you must roll the 20-sided die. If you roll a 19 or 20, the figure survives without taking any damage. If you roll a 1 to 18, the figure is destroyed. So, if Shiori was to take this gigantic leap down, let's take a look. Eldgrim survived his molten lava roll in the Lava Rules video. Let's see if Shiori can survive. Ooh. And because I'm a visual learner, I just like to demonstrate this. 1, 2, 3, 4, Shiori's height. Then the additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 levels higher than her height. Should have went for the water, Shiori, because you're dead. Since Shiori made a poor choice, all examples about movement with 6 are going to be done with Sergeant Drake Alexander from here on out. She is no longer available. Anyway, moving on to water. When you move onto a water space from any other space, even from another water space, you must end your movement there. So, for this example, Sergeant Drake Alexander, even though he has a movement of 6, he moves one space and must immediately stop in the water. A special note that double space figures can move past one water space that is between two non-water spaces without stopping. They must stop only if they move into two water spaces. So when we get to double space movement examples, you could just move across there if you could get your figure here. However, if both bases were to enter the water spaces, Torkul Na must stop his movement. And I don't know really why I'm saying this, but this is Torkul Na. This is his mindless mount that has no name. Alright, in this example here, we're going to go about moving on to swamp water and moving from water or swamp water to land. So first, moving on to swamp water, which is these tiles here. Unlike moving through water, when you move onto a swamp water space from any other space, you may continue moving if you have moves left. And then moving from a water or swamp water to land, for water spaces or swamp water spaces that are lower than their adjacent land spaces, the moving up rule applies. When moving from water or swamp water to land, count the side of each land space as you move. So for example, this is lower because this hex here has a side, so you'd count that moving out. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because you do not have to stop when entering swamp water from any other space. Moving double space figures. Some figures, like Major Q10 and Torkul Na, take up 2 spaces. When moving a double space figure, decide which side to lead with. For example, this side here or this side here. Then move the figure so that the other side, opposite of what you chose, follows the same spaces that the leading side just occupied. Always end a double space figure's move on 2 same level spaces. In this example, in his starting space, Major Q10 will move 5 spaces. We'll use this as the leading edge. His other side will follow the trail. And he has a movement of 5, so it would be 1 for the side, 2, 3, 4, 5. Flipping a double space figure. Anytime during a double space figure's move, you can flip it. To flip a double space figure, turn the figure around while keeping it on the same 2 spaces. The flip is free. It does not count as part of your move. The double space figure does not take any leaving engagement attacks when flipping, since the figure is staying on the same 2 spaces. Leaving engagement attacks will be explained a little bit later on. So, in this easy example, Major Q10 flips to face the other direction, which finally he realizes there's where the enemies are. Overhangs. An overhang exists when one or more tiles are above another tile with space in between. Figures that are small enough to do so may move through the overhang. In this example here, notice that 2 of the Marro Stingers can move under this overhang, but 1 of the Marro Stingers could not. In this example, we'll talk about moving up onto a low overhang. The Marro Stinger will count the nearby support tiles as they move onto this overhang. So, that would be 1, 2, considering moving here, you'd count the support on the side, 3, 4. And for one of the most basic rules of moving is keep the base on the space. When you end a figure's move, make sure its base lies flat and is on that space only. or spaces in the case of double-spaced figures. No part of its base may overlap on another space or area between spaces. So, again, easy visual example here. These are right there, legal, 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 illegal. No. Tight quarters. Some battlefields have narrow passageways, ruins, and overhangs that may limit the movement of some figures. A figure can't move through or onto a space that it can't fit completely onto. In this example here, Torquil Na can't move to right here because his right arm would prevent him from legally staying fully on the space here. So, using his free flip, you could move him, and then he could stand there. And now we'll go over engagement rules. A figure becomes engaged when it moves adjacent to its opponent's figure. Adjacency exceptions. Most of the time, if a figure is next to another figure, they are adjacent. Here's some exceptions to that rule. If one figure's base is on a level equal to or higher than the height of the other figure, they are not adjacent and therefore not engaged. So in this example, Sergeant Drake Alexander is not adjacent to the Marro Stinger because the Marro Stinger is on a ledge which is 5 levels high and equal to Sergeant Drake Alexander's height of 5. If an obstacle, such as a ruin or stone wall or battlement, etc., is between both figures heights must be higher than the obstacle to be engaged. If both figures' heights are lower than the obstacle, or only one figure's height is lower, they are not engaged. So in this example, these two are not engaged because the wall is higher than both of their heights. And when it comes to certain things like this figure here and here, they would still not be considered adjacent even though this part of the wall looks a lot lower than its height. This ruin is considered to have a height of 6. And remembering what obstacle heights are and stuff, you just have to refer to the set that they came in. For instance, this ruin has a height of 6. So although these two characters are on the lower end of this ruin, they are still considered not adjacent. Leaving an engagement. Your figure may move around an opponent's figure that it is engaged with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But as soon as your figure moves away onto a space that's not adjacent, the opponent's figure may take a quote-unquote leaving engagement attack at your figure. To do this, the player who controls the opponent's figure rolls 1 attack die. So we'll say for his 6th movement, Drake decided to move here. The owner of the Marro Stinger would roll an attack die, in this case, inflicting a wound on Drake. You do not roll any dice to defend your figure when you take a leaving engagement attack. If a skull is rolled, your figure would take a wound and you place the wound marker on its army card. Multiple engagements. Your figure may become engaged with more than one figure at the same time. As you leave each engagement, your opponent's figure may roll 1 attack die for each engagement you leave. For each skull rolled, your figure would take 1 wound. So, instead of fighting bravely, we'll decide that Drake runs away like a coward. 1, that's already leaving an engagement there, so you'd take the first roll, which is nothing, and then he moves here, which would be 2 more die from leaving these 2 engagements. Ooh, ouch. And now we're going to go over the optional action attack with figures on your army card. So who can attack? Well, for this example, we'll be using an army card of Marro Drudge. There are 3 of them on the card. So any figure or figures on your chosen army card within range and within a clear line of sight, if necessary, can attack. If no figures on your army card meet those 2 conditions, then no attack is possible. Looking for hidden figures. At any time, feel free to walk around the battlefield to find out which figures are hiding where, behind raised terrain areas, or behind a Marro Hive, or ruins, or any other example like that. As you do this, other players will want to shield their order markers from you so you can't see them. So we have a little hidden Marden Nagrub over there. So before attacking with a figure, check range first and line of sight. Range. A targeted figure must be within the attacking figure's range. For example, with a range of 5, your Marro Drudge can attack any figure within 5 spaces from it. A figure with a range 1 can only attack a figure from an adjacent space. A double space figure can attack from either space it occupies. When checking the range, don't count extra spaces for any differences in levels. The moving up rule does not apply when aiming up. If the distance between your figure and the targeted figure includes an area with no spaces, for example near the edge of a battlefield, you may still attack it, but you must count the spaces along the battlefield for range. So instead of, if you were standing here and your figure was here, you'd go 1, 2. So right here we have 1, 2, 3. This one can attack him. 1, 2, 3, 4. This one can attack him. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That one can also attack. Engaged figures. If one of your figures is engaged with one or more other figures, your figures may attack only those figures. Note that a figure does not need line of sight to attack a figure that is engaged with or adjacent to. So this Marro Drudge, although Sonlin is within its range, is only able to attack Torquil Na because they are engaged. Attacking around other figures. You may attack figures even if other figures are between your figure and the targeted figure, but you must have clear line of sight to do so. And here's how line of sight is determined. To attack a targeted figure, your figure must be able to quote-unquote see from its location. Unlike range, the line of sight is an imaginary straight line between your attacking figure's target point and the targeted figure's hit zone. It has nothing to do with the spaces on the battlefield. If the targeted figure is, for example, behind a Marro Hive or Glyph so that your figure can't quote-unquote see it, then no attack is possible. The only exception to this rule is if a figure is engaged with or adjacent to another figure. A figure does not need line of sight to attack a figure that it is engaged with or adjacent to. To determine if there is a clear line of sight, check the target point, the green dot on your figure's army card, and the hit zone, the red area on the targeted figure's army card. Then, get behind your figure if you can and look to see if its target point can quote-unquote see any part of the targeted figure in their hit zone. If so, there's clear line of sight. If players disagree about whether or not there is a clear line of sight, just roll the 20-sided die. High roll wins this dispute. And adjusting figures. Players may touch or move only their figures and may do so only on their turns. For example, a player cannot move his figure out of the line of sight on an opponent's turn. In the following example, we will learn how to determine if a figure is within attacker's range and clear line of sight. In this example here, so right here, first, you want your Marro Stinger to attack Sergeant Drake Alexander. So, you'll count the spaces from your Marro Stinger to Sergeant Drake Alexander. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's 5 spaces away, so well within the Stinger's range. Then you'll check for clear line of sight from your Marro Stinger's target point, which is the green dots on their army card, to Sergeant Drake Alexander's hit zone, which is all the red area. So let's take a look at that. From the perspective of your Marro Stinger, looking up, it looks like you can definitely see Drake's hit zone, because if you were to draw an imaginary straight line from their target point to him, it would go through his hit zone. And now we come to the rule of attacking. The figures on your chosen army card may attack one at a time in any order. Each figure can only attack once, but each figure can attack the same figure or a different figure. Note, some figures have special powers that allow them to attack more than once. Before attacking, consider height advantage, special powers, and glyphs, if any, as explained. The snooze you lose rule is in full effect. If you forget to do anything, tough luck. Maybe next time you'll remember. Height advantage. If the base of one figure is higher than the base of the other figure, no matter their actual size or height, the higher figure's base has height advantage and rolls 1 extra die for either attack or defense. So in this example, although Sergeant Drake Alexander is medium 5 and the Marro Stinger is medium 4, the base of the Stinger is higher than Alexander, so the Stinger is considered to have height advantage. So if Drake is attacking up, extra defense die. If the Stinger is attacking down, extra attack die. Now, if a base of a figure is 10 levels or higher than the height of the other figure, they get 2 extra dice. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's Drake, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, putting this stinger in an advantageous spot where it'll roll 2 extra dice if attacking Drake. Because repetition helps retention, remember that defending also goes on height advantage. So if the rolls were reversed and the stinger was down here and attacking Sonlin up here, this is well above the Marro Drudge's height of 4, so he would get the 2 extra defense dice from height advantage. Special powers and special attacks. Many figures have special powers or abilities that help them move, attack, defend, and more. So always remember to check your figure's army card to see what special or powers or abilities, if any, your figure can use. We'll take a look at Drake's grapple arm ability here. Instead of his normal move, Sergeant Drake Alexander may use his grapple arm as a move of 4. When counting spaces for grapple arm, ignore elevations. Drake may grapple over water without stopping, over figures without becoming engaged, and over obstacles such as ruins. Drake may not grapple more than 45 levels up or down in a single grapple arm move. If Drake is engaged when he starts his grapple arm move, he may take any leaving engagement attacks. And just because I'm a visual learner and I like to see things in action, let's take a look at a grapple arm move. Drake activates. And 45 levels above him, which he is allowed to move due to his grapple arm, he can meet the Marro Drudge on the battlefield. Continuing our look at Sergeant Drake Alexander, who is a very versatile unit in terms of abilities, he also has Thorian Speed. That's a special power that means opponents' figures must be adjacent to Sergeant Drake Alexander to attack him with a normal attack. So, special ranged attacks may still target Drake, but normal attacks cannot. And then, he also has a special attack. The pistol fire special attack down here has a different set of rules than his normal stats. So the range would be 5 instead of his normal range 1, and his attack would be 3 instead of 6. So Drake may not use pistol fire special attack to attack a figure who follows Jandar. And again, you can see who the figure follows on their army card through the Valkyrie General symbol or through the name. If your army cards include special attacks, it will say special attack in the name. You may use this attack instead of a normal attack. We'll use Sevaris as an example against the special attack rule here. See how pistol fire special attack has it there, but Sevaris has double attack. So he would actually be able to do his normal attack twice as a special power. And any powers that refer to special attacks would not apply to double attack. Glyphs. Some glyphs give the attacker or the defender an advantage. So, using this Marro Drudge, who is allied with Sergeant Drake Alexander in this instance, he's standing on the Glyph of Astrid +1. Referring back to where that glyph came from, the Rise of the Valkyrie Master Set, it says for each figure you control, roll 1 extra attack die. That is a permanent glyph, so as long as one of your figures is occupying that glyph, all of your figures get the extra attack die benefit from it. Using Sonlin and some Marro Drudge in the following example, we're going to go over how to carry out an attack in the following steps. Number 1, announce which figure is the attacker and which is the defender. So if the Drudge were activated, you choose which of your 3 Drudge. Since you have multiple common Drudge, your army card order marker will activate any 3 of these, and you'll choose 1 to make the attack, and you'll choose your targeted defender, which in this case is going to be Sonlin on all the accounts of this attack. Check the attack number on your attacking army card, which in this case is a base of 2. Adding any extra dice for height advantage, special powers, and glyphs. Then roll that many number of attack dice. After you roll, the defender rolls a number of defense dice on their defending army card. Any extra dice for height advantage, special powers, or glyphs will apply to them as well. And Sonlin has a base defense of 3. So then, every skull the attacker rolls counts as 1 hit. For every skull hit the attacker rolls, the defender must roll at least 1 shield to block it. Important, for attack rolls, the attacker only counts skulls. For defense rolls, the defender only counts shields. If the attacker rolls the same number of skulls, hits, or less than the defender rolls shields, the attack is unsuccessful. The attacking and defending figures stay where they are, and that attack is over. If the attacker rolls more skulls, hits, than the defender rolls shields, then the attack is successful. For each unblocked skull, hit, the attacker rolled, one wound marker must be placed on the defender's army card. And that would be life 6 for Sonlin, so he could take 6 wounds before he's destroyed. The Drudge have 1 life each, so every time a wound would be dealt to this army card, 1 would be destroyed. When a figure has as many wounds as they have life number on its army card, it is destroyed. A figure with only 1 life is destroyed by only 1 wound. The player who controls the destroyed figure places it on the army card. When all figures on an army card have been destroyed, the army card is out of play. Do not reveal any unrevealed order marker cards that are on that card for that round of play. On future rounds, you can't take any turns for that card because it is out of play. At the beginning of the next round, any order markers still on that army card come back into play and can be placed in future rounds. So we'll go over destroying a common figure when your army includes 2 or more of the same army card. In this example, Marro Drudge. If your army includes 2 or more of the same common army card, follow this rule when a common figure is destroyed. When any figure on your common army card is destroyed, you may place it on any matching army card if you do not have any of these figures destroyed. If a common army card already has a destroyed figure on it, you must fill up that card first before placing the destroyed figure on an empty card. After you've finished attacking, your turn is over. The player to your left then takes a turn. And let's go through an example of how this attack on Sonlin would play out. We checked if range and line of sight were all applicable, and yes, they were. This Marro Drudge is going to attack Sonlin first. Sonlin has height advantage in this case. So the Marro Drudge would take its 2 normal attack dice, but it has an allied Drudge on the Glyph of Astrid, which adds to its attack. So it would take 3 attack dice and roll 2 skulls towards Sonlin. Sonlin has a defense of 3 normally, but with height advantage would have an extra die to defend. So he blocked that attack. Both skulls were blocked. We would then move to the next Marro Drudge, who's right here, who again would have 2 normal attack dice plus 1 from the Glyph of Astrid. He is on the same level as Sonlin, so Sonlin will lose his height advantage for defense. 3 skulls rolled. Sonlin would roll his defense. 3 defense. He's blocked it. And then we get to our final Drudge on our army card, because an order marker on an army card activates any 3. We'll choose this one up here. Now, he has height advantage over Sonlin. So he has 2 base dice. Height advantage over Sonlin is 1. The Glyph would be 1 more. And then, referring to your special army card powers, Swamp Water Strength. When a Marro Drudge is on Swamp Water space, add 1 to its attack and defense. And it is up on the Swamp Water right here, so it gets an additional attack die on top of that. Its base, its height, the Glyph, and the Swamp Water power. So 4 skulls rolled towards Sonlin. He's guaranteed going to get a wound here, but he rolls his 3 defense dice, and he eats all 4 wounds. So Sonlin, having rolled the best that he could, still gets 4 wounds from 1 attack. I'm going to make a brief interjection video here. Going over how this all operated, in my previous Master Set Rules video, I went over army cards saying that some people like to have a single army card represent all of the commons that they draft for a game, just adding 50 points to the point limit total every time they would take, in this instance, 3 Marro Drudge figures. I believe that that is incorrect now. So the reason that I say that is because order marker loss actually matters in the rules, as well as filling up army cards. So we'll say that the player activates Sonlin and destroys my Marro Drudge figure here. I would have to fill up this army card, which already has 2 Drudge on it, and I would lose that 3rd order marker for the turn, and I mean the X, my opponent won't know that, but going throughout the round, he knows that there was at least 1 order marker on this card that was almost destroyed, And that's why I think it matters to have commons represented by each army card for the amount that you take in the game. Now, I probably wouldn't put an order marker on that fully wounded card, and I'd go for a fresh card, which would require my enemy to start killing Drudge en masse to fill up these army cards and hopefully get me to lose these order markers. But that's why I believe that representation for each army card for the total amount of figures you have is important. Ending a round. After the last player would have taken their third turn, the round is over. Move the round marker ahead on the track one space if nobody has won yet. Players then begin a new round by placing their order markers again and rolling for initiative. A great thing about Heroscape is that not only does the 3D terrain allow you to customize according to your imagination and limitations of the pieces you own to any combination that you can come up with, but it also does that for how to play the game. It can be anything from eliminating the team army or just eliminating all of your opponent's figures, securing zones on the battlefield, getting artifacts, destroying key locations, etc. Either way, no matter what you do, the battle will come to an end. The game scenario, or the prerequisites set by the players beforehand for what they are doing, set victory conditions for the game. However, if the game hasn't ended by a certain number of rounds that you've played, usually listed in the scenario you're playing or agreed upon by the players beforehand, you may decide that the most points wins. This is how to score. Scoring is, in cases where it is necessary, each player or team scores points for each army card with figures still on the battlefield. Score full points listed on the army card even if there is only one surviving figure left on the squad cards. Swarm of the Marro was an expansion pack that introduced a new and special type of unit, the Marro Hive. The Marro Hive is a terrain piece when not drafted or put into an army, and can just be an aesthetic, or it can actually be used. The Marro Hive does have an army card with point values for drafting and army building, but the special rules that apply only to the Marro Hive are as follows. The Marro Hive may never be moved from its starting location by any special power on any army card or glyph. Figures can never move through a space occupied by the Marro Hive. For example, if Shiori didn't fall to her death in her video, she could not use her Phantom Walk special power to walk through the hive. If the Marro Hive is destroyed, it becomes a terrain obstacle and is not removed from the battlefield. When placing the Marro Hive, it is always placed on its 6-hex swamp water tile base. When placing the 6-hex swamp water tile base, you cannot create an overhang. No empty space can be under the base. The 6-hex base can only be placed on land tiles. When calculating height advantage against the Marro Hive, consider the hive to be sitting on the swamp water. And because some of the descriptions of special powers were buried in other segments of the video, special powers is going to have their own segment we'll go over again. The special powers of the figures keep each game exciting, challenging, and unpredictable. Always be aware of the special powers your figures possess. They can make a big difference in your game. Special attacks, again, will always be denoted with special attack in the title. Special attacks can never be modified by glyphs, other special powers, or height advantages. A special attack is used instead of a normal attack. Attack dice and defense dice. That would be, this is an attack dice, this is a defense dice, but later on they came out with combat dice. So whenever an army card refers to attack dice or defense dice, just use combat dice. For example, on Raylan's army card, it states that all figures you control within 6 clear sight spaces of Raylan add 1 to their defense dice. These figures would roll 1 additional combat dice when rolling for their defense. Clear sight spaces. And again, example for Raylan's extended defensive aura, it mentions clear sight. To determine clear sight, use Raylan's target point. If she can see any part of your figures, not just the hit zone, gray included, if she can see any part of your figures within 6 spaces, they are affected by the extended defensive aura. To determine clear sight from a double space figure or a 6-space figure like the Marro Hive, you may count it from any of the spaces that the figure occupies. Swamp water, it is a type of water. Swamp water space is a type of water space. Any special powers that apply to a figure on a water space will also work on a water space. An easy example here would be the Marro Drudge Swamp Water Strength. When a Marro Drudge is on a swamp water space, add 1 to its attack and defense dice. But, for example, the Microcore agents have water suits. Microcore agents do not have to stop their movement when entering a water space. Add 2 to a Microcore agent's defense while he is on a water space. And because this is called Swamp Water Tile, you can remember that that will activate the Microcore agents. Multiple targets. When a special attack targets more than one figure at the same time, the attacker decides in which order the defender will roll combat dice. For example, Machine Pistol Special Attack on Major Q10. Has a range of 7, attack 2. Major Q10 may use this special attack 4 times in the same turn, and Q10 may target the same figure or a different figure with each attack. And finally, we're going to go over flying, a common keyword in Heroscape, but one that he has some different wording on. That's Taelord the Curie Warrior. So we'll go over Raylan's card first. Flying. When counting spaces for Raylan's movement, ignore elevations. Raylan may fly over water without stopping, pass over figures without becoming engaged, and fly over obstacles such as ruins. When Raylan starts to fly, if she is engaged, she'll take any leaving engagement attacks. Alright, we've got a few examples set up here that we can go through. First, we'll start with Raylan the Curie Warrior, and she has flying, but she's underneath an overhang right now. But she can fly out from under the overhang and onto the top, ignoring extra spaces for elevation. The stinger that she's engaged with will get a leaving engagement attack because she is engaged as she starts her movement. But we'll say it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember that she can fly over figures without becoming engaged. A special note that you may find use for sometime in the future is that you can land while you're flying to denote, just not flying. Because while you're moving, you're flying, but while you're not moving, you are landed. But you could choose to just land while flying. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're walking 5, 6. That may come in handy sometime. It may not. It may affect powers or whatever. Just remember that your character is not always considered to be in the air. And with an army card that has a word wall that matches a Discord post from me, Vecna, here's Cyprine S and Wine, and we'll go over Stealth Flying, which is just a little bit of a different variation on flying. It combines the flying ability and the disengage ability. So, when counting spaces for Cyprine S and Wine's movement, ignore elevations. Cyprine S and Wine may fly over water without stopping, pass over figures without becoming engaged, and fly over obstacles such as ruins. When Cyprine S and Wine starts to fly, he is engaged. He will not take any leaving engagement attacks. So, with this drudge that he's engaged with, he can just say, "See you!" And he can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and get over here. Which brings us again to Taelord, who got a special mention in my first Master Rule Set video. This is where paying attention to the wording on your army cards matters. He's an earlier release, so his flying does have different wording. When counting spaces for Taelord's movement, ignore elevations. Taelord may fly over water without stopping, pass over figures without becoming engaged, and fly over obstacles such as ruins. He is missing the when Taelord starts to fly, if he is engaged, he will take any leaving engagement attacks. So oftentimes, it is said that he has stealth flying, but he does not. But a lot of the times, fans have said that he should have stealth flying, or technically does have stealth flying, because of his immense point cost for what he can do, which the arguments over his point cost have been done to death ever since he was released. So, again, it just comes down to if a dispute is on the table because of lack of words, word interpretation, or whatever, the ultimate factor would be the D20 deciding. And we're going to end here with a little bit of rules wrap-up and summary, such as special power references on army cards. Some special powers make reference to the species, personality, Valkyrie, unique, uncommon, common, hero, squad, and or class of other figures. For example, the Marro Hive references any small or medium common squad. The Marro Stingers and Marro Drudge, which came with it in the Swarm of the Marro Master Set, fall into this category. However, Marro Drones from Collection 2 would also fit this category. Simultaneous special powers. If you and an opponent are using the same army cards with powers that happen at the same time, you must roll a 20-sided die to see who gets to use them first. And then, using multiple master sets or expansion sets. Combining 2 or more master sets or collecting expansion sets gives you lots of new options. You can create supersized battlefields and play with any number of players. You can even boost the point value of your armies to match the bigger battlefield. But along with that extra excitement comes a few special rules. For example, unique army cards. If you're combining 2 sets of army cards, make sure that no player has more than one of the same unique army card in their army. For example, your army can't include 2 Shioris. However, you and an opponent can both have the same unique army card. For example, you and your opponent can each have Shiori in your army. Unique heroes with the same name. If you're combining the Swarm of the Marro Master Set, you may notice that other sets have characters with the same name, such as Rise of the Valkyrie. That had a Raylin the Curie Warrior and a Sergeant Drake Alexander. A player cannot have 2 unique heroes with the same name. For example, a player cannot have a Swarm of the Marro Raylin the Curie Warrior and a Rise of the Valkyrie Raylin the Curie Warrior in the same army. I'm just going to wrap up by saying Heroscape is a game that has, since day one, lent itself to creativity, imagination, expansion, fun, and having a blast with your friends. I'm so excited that it's coming back in 2024, and I just wanted to say that making this series of videos has got me back into the game, got me excited again, made me get out my collection, recollect what I might have been missing. So if this is helping you either get into the game, relearn the game, or just get excited about the game, I hope these videos have helped, because there's going to be nothing but good things when content is added to this game. It is so fun. It's approachable from all ages with the basic game rules, people who don't like rules-heavy games, or younger audiences, or people that just don't want to take the time to learn the Master Game. It's just some quick dice rolling on a fun battlefield. But then there's the Master Game, which allows strategy and depth, and really exploring the systems, becoming analytical about it, competitive about it, strategic about it. The system that Hasbro made with the Heroscape game is awesome. I really hope this game becomes widely known to many audiences so other people can enjoy it, start collecting it, really get into it, spread the word. It's going to be great.